must protect children at all costs. We must protect children at all costs. I'm sure many of you by now have seen this documentary here, Quiet on Set. And before I get to that documentary, I want to talk about something real brief and point you to another documentary called Scouts Honor, which is on Netflix. You can watch it now. I actually watched this last year, so I'm tying the two together. And on Scouts Honor, dealing with the Boy Scouts of America, get this, there are over 90,000. Yes, you heard me. There are over 90,000 cases or suits against the Boy Scouts dealing with some type of abuse against little boys. Our boys and our girls in this country are unsafe in a number of places, in a number of spaces, unfortunately. 90,000. Think about that. Let's just say 80,000 were lies. Hypothetically, let's just say 70 to 80,000 were lies. Oh, they just made up, which we know that's not. But even 10 to 20,000 cases is crazy for any organization, right? I don't know how parents continue to send their kids. I am a very, very nostalgic person. Those who know me know that I grew up heavily on Nickelodeon, Disney, Cartoon Network, these places where kids could watch children and teen television content. Loved it. But I am not surprised for 1 second about Nickelodeon. I am not surprised about Disney. I'm not surprised about any of these networks or spaces that there is abuse going on. And this is not to say that Nickelodeon itself, the studio, represents that, or that Disney itself represents that. But there has been a lot of neglect. I think some willful, some unknowingly, and some willful as well. Even at the end of the documentary, or at the end of each episode, or their written response, it's just very generic. It sounds like somebody went on ChatGPT and just gave a basic response. It doesn't sound like a network that is concerned about the welfare of children. It doesn't sound like a network who was ashamed to have had people on their staff that they were paying that was taking advantage of children, little boys and girls. And this is such an atrocious, such an abominable thing that can happen. This is not like, we got in a little fight, we got into a scuffle, or, the workplace just wasn't the best environment. We could have been more professional. This is not things like that, which is bad enough. You always want to make sure you have a healthy workspace. But the fact that this is children being molested, sodomized, fondled, groomed, flirted with, you name it, the worst. Forced into actions, right? And Nickelodeon gives this whack ass response. It does say a lot about the network. It does say something about it, or at least whoever issued the statement, it says a lot about it. They didn't put much thought into it, which could say a lot about their view, which could show why this type of stuff has been happening. But we must protect children at all costs, right? We must protect victims at all costs, especially when it comes to sexual cases. Children are vulnerable. They are not fully mature. Their brain has not fully developed. We need to protect them at all costs. And that means if our children come up to us and say something has happened, it is not right for us to keep them in that same position until we try to figure out what happened. We need to get them to safety, and then we can investigate, right? We need to get them in a safe environment as best as possible. Just like if women or anybody is in an abusive situation, a sexual situation, you don't go to the other person and say, hey, well, let me see if this is true. Well, they said it's not true, so it must not be true. No, you need to provide safety for your child or that person, and then get to the bottom of it, because you can't risk that person being killed, abused even worse, whatever the situation may be. And you don't want to break trust with that person to where they feel isolated because they can't trust you, right? So we have to protect our children and children in general at all costs. I don't think the average child walks around lying about stuff like this. you know, there have been cases, yes, but they're very, very small. They're very rare. Same thing with adults. Adults just don't go lying about sexual assault and things like that. Yes, some have done it, but it's very rare. So let's not act like this is just everyday people just making up stuff. No, oftentimes there is some truth or a lot of truth to what is being said. So we have to take this much more serious than we do. And we have to be wise about who we leave our children with, how long, etc. But this Nickelodeon, or I don't want to say Nickelodeon because it's not a Nickelodeon. It's not produced by Nickelodeon, but it's about some of the things that happened during these actors and actresses' time on Nickelodeon, right? There was racism that was mentioned. There was obscene gestures and jokes and inappropriate work behavior that was mentioned. And there was sexual nature that was mentioned, right? All of these are crazy, especially dealing with teenagers and children, small children. Again, I'm a huge fan, grew up a huge fan of these type of networks. And the same thing that's said about Nickelodeon, it wouldn't shock me if Disney has the similar experiences, would not shock me at all. Drake Bell, who came out and spoke his truth, that is a very courageous thing to do in light of all that happened. These guys should not be allowed to work at any type of network. The Dan Snyders, I don't even remember the other guys' names, but they were arrested. 2 guys were arrested on charges or whatever. And the punk ass court system gave them a very light sentence, right? Which again, it shows how they view. We talked about how Nickelodeon views where this is not that big of a deal to them. The courts, by their lack of punishment, their lack of severity and the charges and what they were convicted of, the courts show they don't take this too serious, And so I think at the end of the day, like I said, we have to protect our children. That's obvious. But also, I'm thinking about a lot more people who have similar situations from these networks or from Nickelodeon specifically. And I'm thinking, I know there's people that it's so traumatic they did not want to come out. Amanda Bynes did not come out. And I don't know if that's because of the trauma or unfortunately, and there are times where you have an adult who's grooming a child and the child grows up and feels like the adult did nothing wrong. The child is so brainwashed and has been so confused and so manipulated and violated that the child who is now an adult may feel that nothing was done wrong, right? You have the victims who come forward. You have victims who don't come forward because of fear or because of trauma. You have victims who don't come forward because they have been manipulated to believe that this type of stuff is okay. Hey, this person got my career started. This person gave me everything I wanted, right? Then you have people who were not done wrong, but they knew or know even to this day that things are wrong. But because they have a career, they may not want to say anything. They may not want to ruffle feathers. They just mind their business. They just showed up. Their parents showed up, they went to work, and then they went home. So you have those type of people, right? And like I said, then you have the people who maybe were molested, but they feel like it's a small consequence for fame. Their families are being provided for. Their children have college tuition. They got to be in the brightest of lights. And so they may feel like it's not really that big of a deal. Yeah, groom, so what? I was 15, he was 35. But I kind of wanted it or whatever like that. They may look at it like that. But either way, it's wrong. But they are victims. Even if they don't come out, they're still victims. And so at the end of the day, I just want to encourage people to protect children and protect them at all costs.